Okay, so thanks for being here, everybody. My name is Matt. I own Treadlight Farm in Kerhonkson, New York. Uh, we are an organic cut flower farm and nursery. We've been here in Kerhonkson for the last, I guess, going on 6 years now. But I've had this business for over 10 years. We started it in Delaware County on the other side of the Catskill Mountains and moved here about 6 years ago now. Um, and basically, what I'm hoping everybody will come away with today is a renewed care for why organic practices matter in growing plants, and something that may not have come across in the um, title of this presentation is also why we should care about native plants, because that is something that we focus on a lot as well. And where these two things intersect, I think, is sort of the next frontier in horticulture, and so I'm hoping that is everybody's main takeaway today, that native plants and organic growing practices are important pieces of the of our response to a lot of the ecological crises that we're currently facing. Um, so here you have a picture of our farm situated in the Rondout Valley. We're right along the Rondout Creek. Um, we have well, I'll get into more about the farm in a moment. Um, there's a part of this presentation that I've always wondered whether it should go at the beginning or at the end. This time I've chosen to put it at the beginning, um, and that's about where our world currently is in terms of climate change and ecological crisis, and why all this stuff matters. So this slide, the information in it and the information in the next slide, a lot of it is lifted verbatim from a book many of you are probably familiar with, Bringing Nature Home by Doug Tallamy. If you're not familiar with that book, I highly recommend checking it out. It's very moving and well written, and will really make you care about um, how we manage our natural spaces and how we manage our unnatural spaces, our human spaces, our gardens, our farms, which, as you can see here, take up quite a bit of land. 3 to 5% of land in the lower 48 United States is undisturbed habitat. That's not very much. You'll also learn from Doug Tallamy that there's a 1-to-1 ratio with habitat loss and species extinction. So if you lose 95% of the land, you're going to lose approximately 95% of the species. So this is a ticking time bomb that we're all surrounded by, and something we should all really be paying attention to. Some more information from Doug Tallamy: 37% of animals are herbivorous insects. So that's a big number. A big percentage of species are insects that feed on plants. 96% of bird species rely on those insects. And another really important takeaway here, and this is the argument for native plants, is that most insects can only eat or interact with plants that they share an evolutionary history with. So we're all really familiar with the monarch butterfly. There are lots of well-publicized efforts to help the monarch butterfly by planting butterfly weed, or Asclepias. There are several Asclepias species, and monarchs make use of all of them. And they need these plants not only for eating, they lay their eggs on these plants and then their larvae eat these plants. So insects can utilize and need to utilize very specific plants um, uh, for their survival, whether it's for laying eggs or for habitat, for making their homes, or for food. Um, so given that so much of our land is already been disturbed by humans, and that trajectory doesn't really seem to be changing anytime soon, it's imperative that we make our human spaces, our farms, our gardens, our parks, more accommodating to the creatures that we share this world with. So, with that, you know, kind of scary message to begin with, I'll switch gears a little bit and just talk about talk about our business, Treadlight Farm, and what we do. Um, and so I'm going to be talking, less about native plants here and more about what we do in our organic growing practices. But I'm going to circle back to the native plants that we specialize in shortly. Um, so uh, our company, we manage about 20 acres, like I said, along the Rondout. We grow annuals and biennials on about 6 to 8 acres every year. We have 1 acre of perennials. All that other acreage we use either for driving lanes, or we put a lot of it into cover crops so that we can rotate um, our growing spaces. There's areas that lay fallow every year, and actually by the math, it's the majority of the space that we manage. We have about 18,000 square feet of greenhouse space. And then we have people, 6 to 7 people work with us year round, an additional 6 to 7 throughout the growing season. So we're well over a dozen people at the height of the summer. Our main business is selling cut flowers. That's how we started. And we sell cut flowers from March until November. In March and April, that's mostly coming out of our greenhouses, and then coming out of the fields after that. And then November and December, it's back to harvesting from our greenhouses. We grow over 150 species of plants every year. So not just flowers, but also plants for foliage, seed heads, branches, all of the things that you can imagine going into a bouquet or an arrangement or a display in a shop window. We grow a little bit of everything. And the one thing that unites them all is that they are all grown organically. We are 100% certified organic, and we can talk a little bit more about what that means in a later slide. Oh, here are just some pictures of some of the things we grow. These are all exotic plants, of course, actually, except for the plant in the top left corner there. That is a very popular cut flower called Lisianthus. It's mostly bred in the Netherlands and in Japan these days, but the parent species for those plants is actually a North American native plant, Texas bluebells, also known as Eustoma grandiflora, a famous wildflower in Texas and the southern United States. But some of these other flowers, these are all exotic, as in they are not native to North America. But they are very popular cut flowers, and that has been our business, is growing cut flowers. So we have ranunculus, poppies, dahlias, heirloom chrysanthemums, just to name a few. And this is just a picture of how we got started. So, like I said, we started in Delaware County. It was just me and my partner growing things by hand scale. And it was just the two of us and some hand tools. And this is in 2014, I believe, this picture when we first started. Um, and we started by selling cut flowers at local farmers markets. So, in the town of Delhi or Margaretville, that's where we were doing farmers markets in our first year or two. And it was a very small operation. And our practices at that time were organic because our backgrounds were in organic vegetable growing. So that was all we knew how to do. And then after 5 years of slugging it away, just the two of us, sometimes with some one or two helpers in the summer, um, we found an opportunity to lease land here in the Rondout Valley. Um, and so we moved our business here. We took down our greenhouses and moved them over and started planting things in the ground. And things have just grown from there. We have a long-term 30-year lease here, so we're not going anywhere. We're on nice river bottom flat ground, so we can really. This is when we really started thinking about increasing our scale. Um, so we bought some equipment, some tractors, and some implements to go with those tractors. We started building more greenhouses, and we're still sort of in that phase of expansion. We build more greenhouses every year, um, and hire more people every year. So we are still a young and growing business. We did get out of doing farmers markets, and we became entirely a wholesale business. So we do not sell to the public. Our business is primarily down in New York City. We send a truck down twice a week from March until November, and we run a delivery route in New York City to wholesalers who then sell to florists and designers. And then we also work with some big florists and designers who can buy large quantities directly. Um, and yeah, our business has grown quite a bit since the move, and we've garnered a bit of a reputation for having really fresh, high quality product, for choosing to grow unique specimens, and of course, because we are certified organic, that is also something that really sets us apart. That's a very rare thing, not just in the floriculture world of growing cut flowers, but also in horticulture writ large, growing ornamental plants. There are almost no large certified organic businesses growing ornamental plants. Food plants, everybody is familiar with organic businesses. Everyone has seen organic lettuce or tomatoes or whatever at the farmers markets or at supermarkets, but rarely do people stop and think where the flowers that they're planting in their garden come from and how they were grown. Um, so this whole presentation is a little bit my plug for shifting your thinking around ornamental plants and expecting the same organic standards from those. So why did we choose to become organic? Here, there's a picture of our organic certificate. We are certified organic by the Northeast Organic Farming Association of New York. Um, and yeah, we chose to do so a few years into starting our company. Um, and the reason why is well, there's a number of reasons. First, there are a lot of really bad practices in conventional cut flower growing, similar to vegetables, but actually quite a bit worse in the growing of ornamental plants, both in nurseries and in floriculture. There's not nearly as much regulation of how much herbicide and pesticide goes down because these plants are not intended for human consumption. So there's also the expectation that when you buy ornamental plants that they look perfect. I think people are a little bit accustomed to buying an imperfect potato or tomato if it's an organic one, but nobody really kind of has that expectation around ornamental plants. Um, So yeah, in floriculture, there's loads of stories of people handling cut flowers, who, after many years, start developing, kind of strange illnesses and cancers, because of their exposure to a lot of the chemicals that are put onto these plants, both when they're growing and afterwards. Um, in With cut flowers, especially, um, most cut flowers are flown into the United States from abroad, where there's even less regulation of herbicide and pesticide use. And then, in addition to that, usually those cut flowers are held in some kind of holding solution that is not just water. There are chemicals in there. Silver is a heavy metal that is used quite a bit in holding and preserving solutions, and can be carcinogenous. But like I said, organic growing practices was all we knew. We didn't really know how to use any pesticides or herbicides, so we didn't. We also didn't want to, because it's dangerous for wildlife, and it's dangerous for our staff, and we don't want to expose our employees to that. Um, but then, in addition, certifying kind of set us apart from other ornamental plant growers. And of course, beyond the business concerns, we are people too, and we care about uh, climate change and the ecological crises that we're facing across the world. We're not impervious to that. We're very much aware of those things, and want to do our part to have a positive impact on those things. So how do we grow organically? It's not easy to grow ornamental plants organically. There's all kinds of wildlife that want to take bites out of things, um, and so yeah, we do have to do some things to try to mitigate that. And the number one thing that we do is we grow a wide diversity of crops. I think it mentioned in a previous slide, we grow over 150 species of plant every year for cut flowers. Um, so that in and of itself means that, if something gets attacked by a bad pest one season, 10 other things are going to not get attacked. And most insects and other pests are, tend to prefer certain kinds of plants. And so growing a diversity of plants really helps sort of mitigate any losses from pest pressure. We do use organically approved pesticides, but very strictly. We only use them. We have our rules around them are we only use them for aphids, and we only use them inside of our greenhouses. We don't control for aphids at all outside in our fields. And doing so inside of our greenhouses, that limits the sort of impact that our organically approved pesticides can have on other insects. Um, and it might be a good time to mention what an organically approved pesticide means. That means that in organic production, you're not allowed to use any synthetic or man-made or human-made, I should say, products. They all have to be things that derive naturally from the natural world. So one common pesticide that's organically approved would be pyganic, which is made from chrysanthemum flowers. And it does an okay job controlling certain soft-bodied insects like aphids. But cultural practices are definitely more important for us. The backpack sprayer really only comes out for aphids on two very specific crops, where aphids can be a problem inside of our greenhouses in the spring and in the fall. So yeah, or the cultural practices that we employ are keeping weed pressure down. So we try to keep weeds down, weed residue down in our greenhouses. We also rotate crops, so we try not to grow the same thing in the same place every year. In fact, we tend to have a couple of years between growing something in the same place. We use cover crops when we're not using ground. And cover crops often are good habitat for beneficial insects that help control problem pests like aphids. We also have movable high tunnels. So imagine a greenhouse that can move. That's exactly what that means. So we can hook up some tractors to our tunnels and move them over a new piece of ground, letting the ground that was inside it before get exposed to the outdoor elements like rain and freezing and thawing, and all the pest predators that are out there. Um, so that also helps us keep down what we refer to as pest pressure inside of our tunnels. And then watering management, trying to make sure we're not putting down too much, just enough. That also helps with aphid control. Um, Over the years, we also started growing more native plants. And again, it was both for business reasons and for some of the reasons mentioned earlier, the importance of growing native plants for wildlife, for the benefit of wildlife. Native plants started coming more and more into our crop plan every year because they were popular with our customers. A lot of them are very unique and not available in the cut flower trade, and they sort of tell a story about where we grow our plants. Things that grow native in New York might not be available anywhere else, and so it does set us apart with our clientele. We can grow very unique species. Um, Sort of the weirder and more unique, the better for our clients. Uh, and these plants also do provide quite a benefit in terms of providing food and habitat for local fauna. And a lot of that local fauna helps control some of the pests that we deal with. So that's definitely an added benefit for our business. And then additionally, we think that, cut flowers, the arrangements you see in photo shoots or in shop windows or in hotel lobbies or at weddings, um, these plants really influence what people decide to put into their gardens, what ends up getting planted around businesses and in parks. So we really believe that the more native plants that we can get into the cut flower marketplace, then people will become more familiar with them and start wanting them for their own gardens and for their local parks. So that's another reason we've always want to bring in more and more native plants. So as we've been running this business, I maybe should have mentioned that we start all of our plants from ourselves. So we propagate everything ourselves. We start things from seed. We start things from cuttings. We do division. You name it. We do that kind of propagation. The only thing we don't do is tissue culture because that requires a lab. But everything else we do a lot of. And part of that is because we're certified organic. We're not allowed to buy in plants every year and harvest organic crops from them because those plants are, ornamental plants. When you buy them, they're not coming from certified organic producers. So we're not allowed to use those for our cut flowers. So that's why we start all of our seeds ourselves, start all of our plants ourselves. So over the years, we really started developing a passion for propagating plants as well. So we have two people on our staff who their only job is to propagate plants. Most of those plants go get planted in our greenhouses and in our fields, and then we harvest cut flowers from them. But we've also become think I mentioned at the beginning, we are, and I think John mentioned, we are a farm and a nursery. So we are also beginning to sell plants to people for planting them in gardens and in landscapes. Um, and so that develops because we got a lot of requests over the years for plants. People loved our cut flowers and wanted to know where to get those plants. Um, and it's also not lost on us that bending over and weeding plants in the field all day, all summer long, is not the most sustainable line of work. So over time, we're hoping to shift more of our resources to the nursery business because I think it's more sustainable for our staff and for ourselves in the long term. Handling smaller plants in greenhouses and moving them around between greenhouses and outdoor holding areas is a lot less labor intensive than field grown plants. Um, and then in addition, having this alongside the cut flowers, it provides another income stream for us. So it sort of spreads our risk around if something bad happens with some of our more important crops in the cut flowers, then hopefully our nursery business, our new nursery business, will help kind of bridge the gap there. So that brings me to our new nursery business. This is organic as well. Everything we do is 100% certified organic. So here we have an image of some of our products. So we are still a wholesale business. So we do not sell these to the public. We sell them to other businesses, and we sell whole trays at a time. Pictured here are what we call landscape plugs. These things are just about as big as a pint pot that you would buy at a nursery. The plants are about that big anywhere, but they require less soil. So they're actually much cheaper per plant than buying a pint pot, even though the plant itself is about the same size. They also tend to establish quicker than pints or quarts or even gallon pots. Planting 5 or 6 of these things would be the same price as planting a couple of quarts or a gallon pot, but you'll fill out more space. The plants will take off faster, and by the next season you'll have even more space covered with plugs, with big plugs like this than with some of the more popular sizes that are sold retail. But that being said, a lot of our customers are also nurseries, so they'll buy trays like this and pot them up into bigger containers because that's generally what retail customers want, is a big gallon pot, a big robust looking plant. And so they'll, if you put this this size plug into a gallon pot in a few short weeks, it will be fully filled out. And so these things are also available from our company from March until October. A lot of these can also get planted directly into landscapes. So we've had landscapers purchase trays from us, and when they're planting like pollinator gardens or for customers who want native plants, they'll buy these trays and put some of these bigger plugs directly into gardens. And these are the kinds of plugs that we grow ourselves. So that we grow really big plants from and harvest a lot from inside of the same growing season. So we know what we're talking about from experience. You can plant plugs like this and have in the spring and have a really robust plant in the summer, or you can plant them in the fall and have a really robust plant the following spring. These are just an illustration of the sizes of plugs that we grow. We grow 4 sizes. The plants that our nursery business sells are all herbaceous perennials. So these are plants that die back over the winter. They're not woody plants. and they are what are referred to as straight species. So they are um, plants that were grown from seed collected from the wild. They were not bred by plant breeders. They were not crossed with anything. These are simply the wild plants that you would see in natural areas. We grow 4 tray sizes: 50s, 72s, deep 50s, and deep 30s. Um, and all of these plants are native to Eastern North America. Most of them are native to the Hudson Valley or coastal areas nearby. Um, and many of them are ecotypes. And I'll talk about what that means in just a moment. So something whenever I'm talking about native plants with people, I like to, you know, iron out some definitions because there's a lot of confusion out there over like what native plants are, what that means. Um, and the good news is that nobody really knows. There's a lot of debates about the word native plant or the phrase native plant and what that means. And some of the contention around that term. Um, native calling something a native plant really depends on your perspective. Native to where? Where are we drawing the lines? And does it just mean plants that were here when European, like for North American native plants, does it just mean plants that were here when Europeans arrived? That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense because there were a lot of people here before that and they moved plants around quite a bit. And when we're talking about native plants on the flip side, we're also talking about exotic plants and invasive plants, and those have their own meanings. Exotic plants simply mean plants that did not evolve in the place where they're growing. And if something's invasive, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad or should be removed. Sometimes removing native plants would do more damage to the ecosystem than could possibly be recovered with native plants. And plenty of local creatures make use of these so-called exotic and native plants for habitat. And yeah, habitats are dynamic. They're always changing. So to say that a habitat should be a certain way with certain plants, you're really just talking about a snapshot in time. Evolutionarily, plants have been moving around the world a lot, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, and so to try to preserve one type of habitat permanently doesn't really make a lot of sense. What I think is really important for thinking about native plants is thinking about what plants evolved in your area, because the insects that evolved in that area co-evolved with those plants. So a lot of insects need very specific plant species that they evolved with in order to survive. And so trying to understand those relationships and support insects that are endangered, I think that's where a lot of the focus in the native plant world is and should be. But I would just like to add, I guess, that it's important, I think, for everybody to take a little dose of humility in the native plant conversation and avoid dogma about planting only native plants or knowing exactly what is native and what isn't. Because a lot of these things are not really well understood by anyone. And so and conversations about native plants can get kind of intense. So I think it's important for everybody to avoid dogmas when thinking about native plants. So what makes a native plant? Like I mentioned, it's its evolutionary history and its relationships with other organisms. And those are opposed to exotic or alien plants. Again, some of the language here is pretty sensitive, and there are debates about whether or not it's all the best language. I think the term native plant has benefit, but some other terms people might like to use are ecologically appropriate plants or ecologically beneficial plants. One term that is very popular is pollinator friendly. To me, that's a bit of a catch-all and doesn't really mean anything because it's used frequently. I see it used in nurseries and big box stores to sell plants that are not at all native. And just because European honeybees like them does not mean that it's necessarily beneficial to other pollinators. Invasive generally I use to describe exotic plants that occur in really aggressive monocultures. So things that will just kind of take over a habitat, if not removed or mitigated. Those are what I refer to as invasive plants. And now we're circling back to ecotypes and ecoregions. So ecotypes are plants that derive from genetically derive from plants that are naturally found in that ecoregion. So, for example, bee balm or monarda, you see it here on the roadsides and in fields. It also occurs all over Eastern North America. But there's a lot of variation in monarda, a lot of genetic variation. And some of them look very different. You have whites and pinks and purples, and different growth habits. Some grow in some places, they grow much shorter, and some places much taller. And so one big trend in the native plant world right now is buying ecotypic native plants. So that would mean that if you were to buy a bee balm plant that was ecotypic, that means it came from seed that was growing naturally nearby in your ecoregion and not, from a field in Ohio, for example. The EPA has defined ecoregions, and there's different levels of ecoregions. Levels, I think, well, for the purposes of this conversation, 1 to 4. I think there are more levels than that. Yeah, level 1 is, and some of these next slides will illustrate this. Level 1 is, just a couple of regions in North America, kind of the quadrants, northeast, southeast, northwest, southwest. And then each successive ecoregion gets more and more specific. So let's take a look at what some of those ecoregions are. So here we have an image of ecoregion 1. So you can see all of Eastern North America, east of the Mississippi, is sort of grouped into one ecoregion. And then you can get a little more specific. Here's ecoregion 2. So now we have some differentiation in Eastern North America. And then you can get to ecoregion levels 3 and 4, where you see things are really divided, and ecoregions change based on topography, on soil types, on the presence of water in the form of rivers or lakes or oceans. And here we'll zoom in. Here's our ecoregion where my farm, Treadlight Farm, is based in Kerhonkson, New York, 67L. So you can see there's a narrow strip there that's in the valley, and on both sides of it are some mountainous areas, which are different ecoregions because there are different elevations, different soil types, and of course you see different plant communities growing in those places. Here again is another shot of New York's ecoregions, and I circled our specific ecoregion there. So just a few more definitions when talking about native plants. A cultivar is a cultivated plant, something that's been bred by people. Sometimes that means crossing species, sometimes not. Nativars is a new term. That means a native cultivar. That means something that's been bred, but from native plants. So you can have a cultivar of Rudbeckia, or also known as black-eyed Susans or brown-eyed Susans. You can have, there are many different cultivars out there, and if they're deriving from native plants, then they're sometimes called nativars. Pollinator friendly, I think I mentioned, doesn't really mean a lot to me. Straight species means that that was just plant material, typically seeds collected from the wild. And it typically means it was open pollinated. So either, if it's a wind pollinated plant, it was pollinated naturally, or an insect pollinated plant was pollinated by insects. Organic growing, that just means no synthetic substances, and some other terms that are common in the gardening world and plant world now are ecological horticulture, which just means that you're designing your landscapes and gardens to support wildlife, which means primarily using a collection of native plants. So where do you get native plants? This is a fast-growing industry. There's lots of places. I just listed some companies here that are kind of national or regional distributors of native plants and seeds. We do business with a lot of these companies, mostly buying from them to start our own supply of plants. And then here are just some cultural practices for the gardeners amongst you. So like I led with, I really hope that everyone comes away from this presentation understanding the importance of ecologically beneficial plants. And for me and my business, that's the intersection of native plants and organic practices. So here I list some of the things that people should take home with them to apply in their own gardens. No pesticides and herbicides. Tolerate some imperfections. If you're planting native plants or plants for ecological benefits in your garden, please don't use any pesticides or herbicides on those plants. Amending soils, you often don't need to do anything unless it's unnatural soil. If you have natural soil in your on your property, then you probably don't need to do anything to it to grow native plants successfully. Certain native plants like high organic matter. Those are the ones that typically like to grow in forest understories. And some like really low fertility. And those are ones where they're growing, on rocky slopes and rocky areas, or in disturbed, where there's been a disturbance like a fire or an earthquake that moved a lot of soil around, getting rid of the topsoil. In general, you don't really need any nitrogen-based fertilizer to grow really good-looking native plants. A lot of native plants prefer the pH that is naturally found in your area. In Eastern North America, that's mostly acidic soil, so no need to put lime down. And then when it comes to mowing, a lot of these native plants, if you want your garden to look tidy, we have to mow around the farm to transition areas from growing one thing to growing another. But we try to be really mindful of our mowing. We don't we don't mow in the fall if something is going to be left over the winter. We mow it in the spring, and we wait till insects are out. because a lot of those plants are needed by insects for overwintering habitat. We mow high, so we don't mow right to the ground. We mow several inches off the ground, typically like 4 to 6 inches off the ground. That also helps not hit rocks. So it saves your mowers. And when it comes to harvesting, when we're harvesting native plants, because we grow a lot of them for cut flowers, we don't take everything. And if we notice insects are using it, like laying eggs on it, we don't harvest it. We leave it there. And then the last thing on here is buy native plants. I really think that's the best thing everyone can be doing for their own properties, or that businesses can be doing for planting around businesses, or that local governments can be doing for planting in parks and other landscapes. Grow native plants, and I really want everyone to start asking their nurseries for organic native plants. One thing that I maybe should have led with a little earlier is that the Xerces Society, that many of you may have heard of, is a national organization that wants to support pollinators, did a big study of native plants being sold in big box stores. Native plants are becoming more and more popular, and so they're showing up in, at Walmart or Home Depot or Lowe's. And that's all good that native plants are getting into some of the bigger markets. But the Xerces Society took a look at some of these plants and did a big study of plants that were being sold as native plants and checked them for pesticide residue. And they found an astonishing amount of pesticide residue on them. So if you're buying native plants from kind of conventional nurseries, there's a very good chance that there's going to be pesticide residues on them. And a lot of pesticide residues are systemic pesticides. So they get inside of the tissues of the plant so that anything that takes a bite out of it will be infected with that pesticide. And they can stay with the plant for a very long time, for multiple years. So it really kind of boggles my mind that people are putting native plants out into the landscape that are poison pills. They are infected with pesticides, even though they're intended to have a benefit for wildlife. So start asking your nurseries for organic native plants, and they're going to tell you, sorry, we don't have them, because they don't really exist yet. People have not been asking for organically certified ornamental plants, and so no one's providing them. But there were a lot of organic farms providing organic produce before people knew to ask for it. So that it's a little bit of build it and they will come, I hope, in terms of what our business is doing. And we're also trying to be kind of at the beginning of the nursery supply chain. Plants that are bought in bigger pots, normally companies that sell plants to you in bigger pots, they're buying those plants in and potting them up and getting them bigger to sell retail. So if there's a supplier of organic plugs and liners for those pots, then those companies will be able to provide organic native plants to retail customers. So that's why we do what we do. That's why we're committed to organic native plants. And I think that pretty much does it for the end of this presentation. There's just a couple of pictures of some of the beautiful native plants that we grow for cut flowers. Over here on the left, we have Centaurea americana, or American basket flower. On the right, we have a native clematis. Here on the left, we have Lysomachia or loosestrife, a native loosestrife. On the right here, we have serviceberry or Amelanchiae. Some deer tongue grass and American hazelnut. and some solidagos or goldenrods on the right here, and an aster species on the left, fall blooming asters. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt. That was pretty good. Um, uh, I'd like to try to focus on these the ecoregions a little bit. You were saying that you're getting your seeds in from plants that are growing in the wilds. You don't have somebody going out there shaking plants in the wild, grabbing their seeds, right?
Oh, absolutely. I'm usually
That's
the one
how
doing
they're
it.
coming to you. I mean, how many could there be?
So the ecotypic plant market is in its infancy. This is sort of a new trend. So there aren't a lot of seed suppliers providing ecotypic seeds of native plants. There are a few. There are a few. There's some smaller nonprofit organizations that do so. Um, Ernst Seed in the Northeast. They're in Ohio. No, I'm sorry. They're in Pennsylvania, I believe. They are providing native plant seeds that are ecotypic for the Northeast. Um, Not necessarily ecotypic for our exact specific ecoregion, but a plant from Pennsylvania is probably better than a plant from Missouri if it's the same, native plant species. Um, for planting here, for example. But no, mostly the stuff isn't available. So we do what a lot of native plant nurseries do, which is we go collect from the wild. We don't collect anything that is sensitive in terms of its conservation status, either sensitive in New York or sensitive globally, or in the region. We won't touch that stuff. We only collect things that are fairly easy and abundant to collect locally. And there are a lot of new projects to get ecotypic plant material and make it available to the nursery industry. The Native Plant Network, based in Massachusetts, um, they're doing a lot of good work to try to help kind of prop up an ecotypic native plant seed industry.
Are you collecting these seeds yourself, or you're buying them from someone who does that?
Both. So when it's available, I buy it. I don't want to. I don't want to be a seed company. That's sort of a whole other business. It adds a whole lot of complication and trouble. So I'd much rather just purchase it from somebody, but it's mostly not available. So when I notice that things are available nearby, I scout for interesting plants. Um, and when I see something that is abundant and easy to collect, and that I know will germinate readily, then I collect locally.
So then would you gradually build up your supply then by letting them, the ones that you plant, reach maturity and then take the seeds off of that?
For some things, yeah, for some things. For some things, it doesn't make sense. Like if you take, for example, the Solidago species or goldenrods. There's a number of goldenrod species that just grow in wild abundance along my farm field. It doesn't make any sense for me to go, start a plot of goldenrod to grow seed for it when I can get, you know, 50,000 seed in 3 minutes just walking down the side of my field. More seed than anyone would ever need. They're very abundant seed makers. So it doesn't make sense for every species to grow and what you're referring to is called a founder's plot. So a plot where you grow native plants from seed for the purpose of collecting that seed, so it doesn't have to be collected from the wild. And founders plots make a lot of sense for things that don't grow in abundance or grow in hard to reach places. Um, but So yeah, we do a mix of both.
So you're buying your seeds, not necessarily the forget the word now, typical,
Ecotypic. Mhm.
ecotypic um, seeds, but you're buying seeds from someplace. Do you let those seeds go to reach maturity and save those seeds for next year? Are you allowed to do that from the place that you're buying them from?
Oh yeah, that's perfectly legal, especially for native plants, because like I said, I'm only growing straight species native plants, so there's no patent or
Mm,
copyright on any of these things.
yeah,
Nobody owns these. That changes a little bit if you're buying cultivars that are bred.
right.
Um, the work of breeding is, I think it's worthwhile work. I think it's great stuff. Sometimes you get really fantastic plants out of it. Um, and to support that work, those plants are often protected in some way where there's, when you buy them, a certain percentage of the price goes to the people who bred it. So, I wouldn't want to circumvent that process. It would be illegal also.
Yeah. Anne, you're
Yeah, hi. Um, I have several service berries that I planted from different sources, but nothing from big box stores. Are you telling me that these are toxic plants to
No,
wildlife?
not necessarily. No.
How would I know if they are or they're not?
um, I don't think you would. I don't think there's necessarily a way to know. If you know where you got them, you could ask the nursery what their practices are. And nurseries generally will tell you, uh, there's a few things I've heard from nurseries. They'll either say, we are neonic free, which means we don't use neonicotinoids. That's sort of the big bad scary monster in the pesticide world right now. Of course, all the other pesticides that are not neonicotinoids are also very bad, I think, especially when applied to native plants. But you can ask your nurseries, were the plants I bought from you treated with anything?
Yeah.
And then hopefully they'll be forthright about their answer.
Okay.
I have a question. I know when I bring in cut flowers and I haven't sprayed them, they've grown in my garden, they may not be perfect. I often also are bringing in ants and spiders and other little creatures. And you must run into this problem. How do you deal with that issue?
Um, well, generally, um, our products go through quite a bit of quality control. The people harvesting them are trained to look for potential insect pests on those plants. Um, Ants haven't really been an issue for anything. Sometimes they're on our oh gosh, what do you call them? Peonies. You
Yes.
often see ants on peonies because they have a little bit of a sugary sap that they produce. Um, and usually just if we see them, we'll give them a quick little spray. But our customers often find, a very tiny little thing that we missed, a little spider or a little something that we're not looking for. And generally no one's ending up with like masses of pests on their table. It's usually just like one or two occasionally that are seen, and so we haven't really had any complaints about it. The one exception being aphids. If there's an aphid infestation, or if there are a lot of aphids on your plant, they're often green and very hard to see. They're often tucked away in little creases and things. A lot of the plants that we harvest them when they're closed, before they're fully open, because that's the proper harvest stage for cut flowers, for a lot of cut flowers. Um, and so, if you haven't been scouting for aphids, that thing could be chock full of them. And then when it opens, you just get aphids spilling out everywhere. But we know which plants to look out for aphids. It's the ones inside. It's really two specific species of plant that we grow in our greenhouses in the spring and in the fall that we scout for aphids. We spray for aphids, and we're meticulous about, making sure that they're not on our plants, because those are really the ones where you can put, if you have a plant full of aphids and you put it on your table in an arrangement, you might not see them at first, but the next day you might have just like a dusting of aphids across your table. So that's really the one that we're looking out for. The other insects, it happens here and there, but we generally don't deal with like, infestations of anything.
All right. Do you ever end up just picking them off by hand? I mean, insects and
Some, yeah. Japanese beetles are a bad
yeah.
one.
So
So those,
you don't use the sex attractant for the beetle, the
no,
traps.
no, no. The only thing we use for insect pests are spraying for aphids inside of our greenhouses in the fall and in the spring on two very specific plants, and everything else is, yeah, just cultural practices. So including sometimes picking things off by hand if we see them, but generally if there's already a Japanese beetle on like a zinnia or on a dahlia, there's probably already a chomped petal, so we're not going to be selling that anyways. That's going to be something that we just cut and leave on the ground.
Is there a market for organic cut flowers? Is it are people looking for that? The people
You
who are,
know, more and more. I mean, the customers that we do have are really, really into it. But no, I mean, I think it's still sort of in its infancy. Like I think most people still don't even know that that's a possibility. Um, so people aren't really requesting that. Um, I think most flowers are being bought at a corner store or a supermarket, and nobody really thinks twice about where they're coming from. And that's just kind of the same for ornamental plants writ large. I don't think people are really thinking about what might be on those plants.
There's two hands up. Bert, do you want to ask your question?
Raised her hand first, so I'll give it to her and then I'll ask the question.
Okay, Penny.
Well, I had one serious question, which is what cover crops? But then I had a couple of other questions that were coming directly from what you said, which is a quick little spray and two plants. And both I would love to know what two plants, because I think I know, but and what with what are you quick little spraying? You ever use Milky Store? And what value does mugwort have?
Oh, okay.
I
I might
can
have to
say
ask.
again, one at a time.
Yeah. Okay. So,
What
what was the
cover
first?
crops? That was the
What's
series.
cover crops? Okay, cover crops. We always do a blend. We don't do monoculture cover crops, so it's always at least two different species together: oats and peas, rye and vetch, winter wheat, Austrian winter pea, buckwheat, Sudan grass, and sun hemp is a combination I really like. Um, so yeah, usually a blend of two or three cover crops at the same time.
Great. And what's the quick little spray and with what?
The quick little spray. So we do it sort of as soon as we start, as soon as we see an aphid is when we start. And so the plants usually are not full grown; they're smaller. And so when I say a quick spray, I mean like someone's at a walking pace going by them quickly.
But this
Um,
isn't the day of the wedding.
oh, we don't. If something's at the harvest stage and has aphids on it, we're not harvesting it.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, that's just a loss. Hopefully, it never gets that bad. Um, but what we're spraying also, Azagard. So yeah, aphids reproduce very quickly, and so tend to become immune to sprays very quickly. So we tend to alternate between three: Pyganic, Azagard, and usually like an insecticidal soap. So Azagard is like is also a plant protein. It's a growth inhibitor. Um, so it like prevents basically the reproductive cycle of aphids. It won't kill the aphid that it touches, but it will stop it from reproducing. So that's one that has to be applied very early. And what are the two species we spray in the spring? It's ranunculus.
Yeah.
Ranunculus is a very popular spring cut flower for us, and we only grow it in our greenhouses. It's not something you can really grow outside in this climate, um, and um, and it has so many layers of petals that if you have aphids on them, then it's totally lost. So that's one that we're meticulous about, um, and and then the other one is our main fall crop in greenhouses. It's heirloom chrysanthemums. Similar story. They have so many dense layers of petals that if aphids are on the like as soon as there are aphids on it, even before there are flower buds, we start spraying. Um,
Okay. I don't think I've ever noticed aphids on chrysanthemums, but
Oh, I've had to. Heirloom chrysanthemums are a lot of work. We start them from cuttings. You have to plant them in the spring, and they don't bloom until the fall. So they're in the ground for 6 months, and
yeah.
and then you do a lot of like disbudding and thinning, and you have to keep them weeded and watered and fertilized that entire time. There's so much work, and I've had to throw out a whole greenhouse full of them because there were aphids. We just didn't
Okay.
get to harvest them. It was.
So you mentioned yellow loosestrife, and I think of loosestrife generally as an invasive and a killer.
Mhm.
And where's my fireweed?
Yeah.
And the yellow, I don't know about as an invasive, but if you're
No.
selling loosestrife and they don't have yellow, maybe they're going to get pink, and then, well, whatever.
Yeah, so this raises a very good point, which is that when we're dealing with native plants, it's important, I think, to start familiarizing yourself with the taxonomic names of things. I probably first referred to it as Lysomachia ciliata. Um, Lysomachia, when you have a botanical name, the first word is the genus, the second word is the species. So Lysomachia is a big genus. There's lots of plants in there. Not all of them are native. So there are things called loosestrife. When you use the common name, that's where there's lots of confusion. Sometimes common names are applied across different genuses, across different species. Generally, when you're speaking with plant professionals, you got to use the taxonomic name. Yeah, there is something called loosestrife. You're totally right. There is something called loosestrife that's very invasive and aggressive, and people shouldn't grow. There's a purple one,
Purple
and
is
then there's also the white gooseneck one. Both very pretty plants, sure, but they are invasive. They don't really serve any ecological function. Local insects can't make use of them. But there are Lysomachia species also called loosestrife that are native that have a lot of benefit to local wildlife.
And that's the yellow one.
There's a few yellow flowered species that I know of. I'm not a botanist. I'm a commercial professional, so there are better people
They're
to be able
beautiful.
to tell you if they're all yellow flowered. I don't know.
Anyway, thank you so much. And if you want to address mugwort, I'm sort of kidding.
Oh, right, mugwort, artemisia, yeah. Um, I don't really know of a good way of getting rid of it. I know a lot of, you see a lot of insects in big patches of mugwort. I think a lot of creatures are making use of it. Ideally, you don't let it go any further from where it is. But if your question's about like how to manage it, I think it's that contained. Just try not to let it go any further because it will like take over a riverside or take over a stream bank or And it's very, very hard to get rid of once it's there. Really, the only way to try to get rid of it would be to plant trees, plant big trees, shade it out.
Okay, thank you very much. I pull it up.
Yeah, I was wondering about the business side, the product mix, the plants that you sell. Is that largely the same from year to year, or has it grown? Because I know you have 20 acres now. You moved. Has it been growing, the product
Yeah,
mix, the varieties that you sell? I'm just
yeah,
curious. Generally,
definitely. Yep, yep. It grows, it changes. With the cut flowers, I think we've sort of kind of hit a place where we're more changing things out rather than adding new ones.
okay.
So we do grow new species every year, but that's usually replacing something else. Um, and with the new nursery business, that's a new business for us. So most of those species that we grow for the nursery business do not necessarily make good cut flowers. Many of them are like short or just for whatever reason not appropriate for cut flowers. So a lot of those are new to us, and I think we'll be seeing what is successful with our clients and growing trying to grow more of what people want. That ultimately that has to be our focus at the end of the day, because yeah, we're a commercial enterprise. We got to sell our plants. Um, I think we're going to be throwing spaghetti at the wall with our nursery business. Trying lots of new plants every year, but um, I think over time that will maybe start to narrow on what growing mostly like the things that are good sellers and are profitable for us.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Quick question here. Back to the pesticides. These American Beauties here you can get at any nursery. I
Yeah.
got these at Casco Native, so I assume there are no pesticides in this. But you can get these anywhere. Do you happen to know if there are any, like if I were to get them at a conventional nursery? It
The only way to know is to
would
ask.
be safe to buy, right?
What's that?
It would be safe to buy. But they don't have one section for conventional nurseries and another section for native nurseries.
No, no. I think most native plants being produced are being produced by conventional nurseries. Um, so I think it's a big question mark whether or not there's a pesticide residue on them. I know a lot of native plant nurseries say we are neonic free. That's great, but that doesn't mean they're free of other pesticides. Um, and I really actually respect the American Beauty's brand and the companies that produce it. I think they're doing a service by getting more native plants into the marketplace. Um, but I happen to know that none of them are certified organic. And one reason why I really think there's value in organic certification for the ornamental plant world is that um, anybody can say we don't spray or we're organic, but if you're not certified, there's no accountability. There's no way to verify. So you really just have to take people at their word. And conventional nursery practices are such that I would be highly suspicious of that. So they'll probably say something they don't want to. Nobody wants to lie, so they'll probably say something like "we're neonic free," which kind of conceals more than it says.
How much
So
does it cost?
to certify
Yeah.
organic certification costs are entirely dependent on. Well, it varies depending on who your certifier is. For my certifier, it depends entirely on your gross organic sales. So if you sell between X and Y amount, your fee will be a certain amount. If you grow and sell a higher amount, your fee will be a higher amount. For me, it costs thousands of dollars at our scale every year. And there's, of course, maybe just as expensive is all of the, whenever organic seed is available, we have to buy that, and it's usually more expensive. Whenever we have to do tons of record keeping, so much record keeping. We have to be able to trace everything that we sell back to the seed or plant that we initially bought. And we have to be able to show receipts for everything that we applied to that plant in between. So all of that record keeping is a lot of work. And that's, the number of hours that go into that. I have different staff doing record keeping around it too. If they put down fertilizer, they have to make a note of that. So that's probably just as expensive as the actual fee. Yeah, so it's not cheap.
Kind of hurts to think that we're buying native plants for the insects that we are poisoning.
I agree. I agree. Yeah, there's a very famous gardener, horticulturist, Rebecca McMacken, who I think she's now at Harvard, but she was the head of Brooklyn Bridge Park, the new park in New York City, the largest public park project since Central Park. And she, in a presentation, had an anecdote about buying a plant. They had noticed a kind of rare insect in their gardens and at Brooklyn Bridge Park. And they bought some plants specifically to help support that insect because it was a plant that insect needed. And then they, after planting, they saw the insects on the plant, and then a few days later noticed the insects were all dead. And so they contacted the nursery that they'd gotten the plants from and asked if anything was, any pesticides were applied. And sure enough, it's a conventional nursery, of course, so some things were applied.
Don't tell any more stories.
I think it's great that there's a lot of focus on native plants in the horticultural world right now. I'm just kind of I can't really contain myself when I don't hear anyone mentioning the pesticide use in these conversations. It's frustrating, to say the least, as a certified organic business to hear people talking about the ecological benefit of native plants without also talking about how these plants are produced and what might be on them.
Yeah. I see in the chat, do you know of any other growers doing what you do locally or any other states or anywhere?
I was shaking my head because no, but I should qualify that. No, I don't know of any certified organic ornamental plant businesses other than our own. I do know of a lot of ornamental plant businesses that use organic practices and don't spray any pesticides or herbicides, but they're not certified.
Yeah.
And those are people I know personally. Mostly they're cut flower growers because that's the world I've mostly been in. And so these are people I know personally, and they, they're careful about using the word organic because if you're not certified, it's technically illegal to use the word organic or even organically grown in any of your materials, in any promotional materials. You're not supposed to touch the word organic at all unless you're certified. So a lot of them say naturally grown. That's a good way around it. And so, yeah, they're, and just going by my small sample size of the growers that I know who don't spray any pesticides or herbicides, that tells me that there are probably a lot of businesses out there that don't, and that's great. And if they tell you they don't, they're probably telling the truth. But again, I come back to, I really believe in accountability and verifiability when it comes to these things. And the only way to get that is with organic certification. So that's why we're certified organic. We believe in it. There are other certifications out there, like certified naturally grown is one, but it doesn't have the legal repercussions and the monetary repercussions that would come about if you were lying as um, a certified organic grower. So, um, yeah, to me, organic certification is really the only verifiable way.
Do you happen to know if New Moon or Prairie Moon, if they're organically certified?
They're
Getting
definitely
your
not
seeds?
certified organic. No,
No, you're getting your
no.
seeds from them, or you're not getting your seeds from them.
I get seeds from them. An organic producer does not have to buy organic seed if organic seed is not available. So
Hmm.
there are, but all of your growing practices after you buy the seed have
Yeah.
to be organic.
So it could be safe to say that if you're buying plugs, um, by the time they turn into something big, then whatever is left in there, like if you buy plugs from Prairie Moon,
Mhm.
that would be safer than buying a gallon pot from
Home
conventional.
Depot. Yeah,
Home Depot,
100%,
yeah,
100%. Yeah,
or
yeah.
even a pint.
I think at home, at a place like Home Depot, you're never going to know where that plant was grown. Like
Yeah,
they
yeah, I
work
would
with
do that anyway.
probably dozens or hundreds of nurseries across the country.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, good luck finding out where that plant came from. But I mean, who knows? Maybe I don't really shop there for plants, so maybe on the tags it has some indication of where it was grown. But no, uh, to me, Prairie Moon, New Moon Nursery, these are reputable places that I think really care about the impact of what they do. So I'm sure if they are using any pesticides, they're doing it very responsibly, or as responsibly as they know how. Um, but and I would also believe whatever they tell you if you ask them, what's been sprayed on this, if anything. They'll probably tell you, and I'm sure they'd be telling the truth. Um, but you would have to ask to find out, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Alan?
Um, One thing you haven't talked about, apparently you were saving seed. Is there any effort to save heirloom seeds for these flowers, and who's doing it if there is?
Yeah, I think I mentioned the Native Plant Trust based in Massachusetts. They've started something called the Native Plant Network. They are building facilities to have for seed banks to preserve seeds of native plants. And there are other seed banks in existence across America that save plant seeds. Um, so yeah, there are definitely efforts around that. I don't know a whole lot about them, but yeah, they do definitely exist.
And is this something useful for your business or?
Anything that's increasing the supply of native plant seed would be useful for my business. Yeah, because there isn't a lot of supply. There's not a lot of supply, and what supply there is mostly coming out of the Midwest. Even for plants that are native here in the Northeast, a lot of plants have a big native range, so they'll be native from New York until Wisconsin or something, and then down south to Texas. So they can supply those plant seeds, um, but and that's when you start wondering about ecotypic plants and like are those plant seeds really appropriate for restoring habitat in New York? But yeah, there's very little seed production happening in the Northeast. The Native Plant Trust is a nonprofit entity that is putting a lot of effort into that.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Uh, we could go on all night, but we're gonna have to slow down here. Thanks a lot, Matt, for
Yeah,
coming over here. It was fascinating. Really happy to to support you and
thank you.
Thanks, guys.